On your Friday episode of Locked On Raptors, Donovan Mitchell has been traded to the Eastern Conference as was much expected, but it is to the Cleveland Cavaliers and not the New York Knicks, which has some ramifications for the Raptors and their status within the Eastern Conference. So on today's show, we'll dig into all of it. Do the Cavs jump past the Raptors in the preseason projections? How does that rivalry look? What does that matchup look like if the Raptors and Cavs were to square off and say, I don't know, a 4-5 series or something like that? We'll get to that and so much more as we continue to assess the Eastern Conference once again with Vivek Jacob from Raptors.com. Thanks so much for being here.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to episode number 38 of Locked On Raptors for Friday, September the 2nd. I'm your host, Sean Woodley of RaptorsHQ.com. You can find me on Twitter as always, at WoodleySean. You can find the show at Locked On Raptors, and you can follow, subscribe to, rate, and review the podcast for free on all your favorite podcast apps. You can also go and support the show on YouTube for free. Just a big red subscribe button. You go to the Locked On Raptors YouTube channel, you support the show by pressing that big button, and I am forever indebted to you for the rest of time. Thanks as always as well for making us your first listen of the day. And let's get to it. Big news in the NBA yesterday. Surprising news. Donovan Mitchell is a Cleveland Cavalier traded from the Jazz to the Cavs in exchange for Lauri Markkanen, Colin Sexton, Ochai Agbaji, and a whole whack of picks. 3 unprotected firsts, a couple of swaps as well, and the Jazz continue to stuff their coffers with picks like freaks, and the Cavs get a lot better. And here to talk about it is Vivek Jacob. We're going to first react to the deal. We'll dig into what it means for the Raptors. Then we'll kind of look at the dregs of the Eastern Conference and see if there's any more teams the Raptors should be worried about, or if the Cavs are kind of the cutoff. We'll get to that in a sec. But Big V, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. I am excited for the weekend. Ready to get this started. Enjoying the U.S. Open, as always. And there's some cricket going on with the Asia Cup, so it's a good time right now.
Excellent. Yeah, who doesn't love a long weekend, baby? It's just the damn best. Very excited myself. Let's dive on into the Donovan Mitchell trade, shall we? The news comes down yesterday. What was your first response? Did you like it for the Cavs? Did you dislike it for the Cavs? Did you have any sort of knee-jerk reactions related to the Raptors, the sort of price for the deal, whatever it is? What were your sort of overall takeaways from the Mitchell trade on Thursday afternoon?
Yeah, overall the deal is pretty fair, but I do like that the Cavs got better. I think when you look at it in a vacuum, you give up Markkanen, you give up Sexton, you give up Agbaji, and you get Donovan Mitchell, who is a 3-time All-Star, a very good scorer. And they got better in a vacuum. So it's going to make the East more competitive. Is it, the optimal way in which they needed to get better? No, because you look at the importance of wings these days. All they have to show right now is Isaac Okoro. So, who is probably a bit undersized.
Look at this Lamar Stevens erasure. Unbelievable.
So I think that is still going to be a problem for them against the top teams in the East, against the top teams in the league, period. So, they got better. They've probably solidified their potential as, again, one of those bottom tier East playoff teams.
Yeah.
But I don't think they've done enough to, maybe squeak into the top 4, let's say.
That's fair. I mean, this team could be a regular season wins machine. As much as we like to clown on Donovan Mitchell because he's kind of lame, he did, orchestrate the number 1 offense in the NBA last season, an offense that for a time looked like it was going to break records as the best offense we've ever seen. He's really good. And the Cavs offense last season, as great as the whole Mobley, Allen, and Garland trio was, offense was not that team's bread and butter. They were a bottom 10 offense last season. And bringing in Mitchell, I think it can only help. You get another pick and roll partner for Jarrett Allen, which is horrifying. And I think it's kind of a bet on the transcendence of Evan Mobley to say, yeah, sometimes small backcourts that are a little light on defense don't work, but we have Evan Mobley. If anyone's going to be able to mop up the mistakes of the small backcourt, it's probably Evan Mobley, who is the best defensive prospect we've seen in the NBA since like Tim Duncan. That's not a bad bet to make, I would say. Like, if any team is ready to withstand the lack of wing play, it's probably them. I do wonder about a playoff series, though, because like Mitchell and Garland are going to get feasted upon on switches time after time, and you can better scheme out guys like Mobley and Allen in a playoff series where you have 7 games in a row to look at a team. But like, obviously you make this trade if you're the Cavs, even if you're a little bit lukewarm on the idea of Mitchell with them, or lukewarm on the idea of him being there the entirety of the rest of his deal, which I think is another sort of concern to bake into this one if you're a Cavs fan, if you're the Cavs front office. But like, you trade a bunch of picks which don't mean anything, because I'm at this point where like the picks are just make believe now. All of the picks just get shipped out in these deals. They're so far in the future. They'll probably be valuable at some point, but I feel like we've got to sort of get a bit of a reset on the actual very good basketball players are the thing of value here, and not the picks in the future for speculative teens who right now, in the case of the 2029 pick that's going out, are in the 6th grade. Like, it's silly to me that it feels like star players have almost become undervalued in these trades because people are so horny for their picks. And like, the Cavs win because they get the very good player in the deal. Maybe Abaji's a good player. I don't know. Who's to say? I'm not a draft guy. He was a mid-first round pick. Like, flip a coin. Maybe he's good. Maybe he's not. Lauri Markkanen, I thought, was like a weird fit on that team. As much as they made it work last year, I don't think it was particularly sustainable to have him playing the Andrea Bargnani ceremonial small forward spot. It didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. They're way better. It was a no-brainer deal, even if it's not a perfect deal. And for a team like the Cavs, who have won a title recently, who typically, without LeBron James in town, are a disaster show, like, go for it, man. Like, by all means, have fun, go nuts with your big trade, and go get a star player. And also making the Knicks look bad in the process is really fun as well. Any other sort of takeaways from this deal? Maybe the ramifications around the league, around the other teams sort of in the Raptors orbit, perhaps. I guess the Knicks are kind of the other team to talk about here before we get to the Raptors-Cavs sort of tete-a-tete. Any other sort of key takeaways from this deal, Big V?
I think the one takeaway I would have is that, as far as picks are concerned, the market has not cooled. I was wondering, as the time had passed from the Rudy Gobert deal, the DeJounte Murray deal, would front offices sort of just acknowledge that, hey, there were no prominent players coming back in the deal, therefore you had to include all these picks. Mm-hmm. In either the DeJounte or the Rudy deal, right? And so now, when there's 3 unprotected picks as well in this deal and the 2 pick swaps, it tells me that the market has legitimately reset, and that is the expectation now, and probably not going to change through, say, potentially, the trade deadline.
Yeah, it's it's going to make any star trade in the future more difficult to pull off for sure if you're a team like the Raptors who kind of positioned yourself to be in that mix. Like, I would imagine that if ever a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, your fave, comes up, like, that's going to be a ludicrous pick package that goes out just because that's the way it is. And like, I don't know what it's going to take to reset it. Like, obviously these things are fluid and they're cyclical and they do change, and the sort of views on draft picks, it's probably going to take one of these deals to blow up spectacularly in some team's face. Maybe another, in addition to the Nets one, which maybe is going to be fine now. Who really knows with the Nets? But it's going to take one of these to blow up spectacularly, probably to alter the way things are viewed. But I got to say, the draft is going to be extremely boring for the next 6-7 years because it's the same 5 teams that have all the picks. And I think that sucks. They should redistribute those picks. I don't care. It's just lame and sad, and the sort of stratification of the league. It's a weird time in the league because with the Cavs getting better, like I think you could argue there's like 20 legitimately good teams in the NBA right now, and there's like 5 teams that are just complete abject embarrassments. And I don't know if I love that construct. I guess it's nice to have more good teams, and there's always going to be bottom teams that everyone beats up on. But the style that the sort of teams that have taken to get to the bottom, the way they've done it is a bummer to me. And I'm glad that I don't root for a team that is fetishizing picks over actually having good basketball players on the team. We're going to continue on and talk about the Raptors and the Cavs and how they line up, because I think you could argue that they're basically in the same sphere now in the Eastern Conference. I think I would have had the Raptors pretty comfortably ahead of the Cavs coming into the year, but the Mitchell addition, the boost that's going to bring to the offense, certainly makes them a bit more of a formidable opponent. We're going to dig into the very interesting on-paper matchup that is Raptors-Cavs in just one sec. But first, we have a message, a very important message from the NHTSA to pass along to you. Are you one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned? What's the worst that can happen, right? You end up driving below the speed limit. It's no big deal, right? That's wrong. The truth is your reaction times slow way down when you're high, not only putting yourself in danger, but everybody around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you have been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different, drive high, get a DUI. All right, we continue on here with your first listen of the day. Now digging into I think the matchup that I'm most excited to watch for the Raptors this coming season, and it just so happens to be the season opener on October the 19th, which is fantastic. Raptors, Cavs, Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley, the rest of their team, which is less interesting, against the Raptors. Really interesting mix of long dudes. It's zero wing versus all wing. It's a very fun sort of styles make fights type of situation. Yesterday, per Bet Online, the Cavaliers jumped ahead of the Raptors in title odds, as far as more likely to win the title. Fair. I don't know. That's, it's not always predictive. It's more sort of where the money's going and all of that. But the Cavs jumped ahead of the Raptors in terms of whether they're going to win the title or not, the likelihood of such. The on-paper matchup is really fascinating. I think you could argue Pascal Siakam is the best player between either team. Maybe the Cavs have the next 2 or 3 best players until Scotty Barnes makes his emergence or whatever. Like, it's a fascinating couple of teams, obviously linked by the fact that they have 2 of the prized studs of the 2021 draft, and Evan Mobley and Scotty Barnes as well. Those matchups were really fun to watch last season. Lots of sort of tension and fuel in those. I'm curious, Vivek, like, Raptors Cavs, like what's your sort of read on this as a sort of head to head right now? Do you agree that they're kind of in that same tier in the Eastern Conference, maybe just below that sort of upper crust of contenders? And how does this all sort of affect the Raptors as they go in now with a little bit more of a challenge in terms of getting into a top 6 seed with maybe 7 teams you could argue being top 6 worthy?
I think the Raptors are better. I think the Raptors will likely be competing for home court, not just the top 6 spot. I'm pretty high on them coming into this season. I think I'm encouraged by the fact that they had a good record against plus 500 teams last season. The Raptors finished 28-22 against plus 500 teams. The Cavs, on the other hand, were 21-29.
Yep.
And so you would expect that to improve with Donovan Mitchell in the mix. But at the same time, I think part of it is that deficiency at the wing position, right?
Sure,
that's just such a critical position in the league. And so when you go up against those teams that do have those elite wings, it becomes a problem. And so what the Cavs are going to do with Pascal Siakam and Scotty Barnes remains to be seen. I think looking at the Raptors as well, as far as seeding is concerned, while they had a good record against plus 500 teams, they didn't do as well as they should have against sub 500 teams. They were 20-12 against them. So I expect that to improve as well. So I would expect the Raptors to finish with a pretty good regular season record, a very good regular season record. I keep going back to the point that after December 29th, they finished the season 34-17. And that was a time when Fred VanVleet was injured. That was a time when OG Anunoby barely was playing. And so you add those players to the mix. You add Otto Porter Jr. to the mix. Thaddeus Young for the full season, potentially if he doesn't get moved. You've got a very, very good team. So I still have the Raptors above the Cavs, but the Cavs did close the gap a bit.
Yeah, I think I agree that, like, in a head-to-head matchup, I think the mix the Raptors have has a pretty good shot of kind of exposing the very clear, obvious flaws on the Cavs. As far as like regular season goes, I think I'm probably going to knock my win projection for the Raptors down a couple with this, and also with the Nets kind of being a real team, just because there's fewer wins to go around, right? Like mathematically,
Yeah.
it's just going to be, more teams fighting for wins, and like it's just, look, I think there's going to be some horribly wretched teams that have a whole lot of losses on their ledger, so that's going to sort of feed into the win column for a lot of these top tier teams in the East as well. But I think, I could totally see the Cavs finishing ahead of the Raptors. I think their offense is probably going to be pretty good. Even with Isaac Okoro out there shooting 29% from the corners or whatever the hell he does. Like, I think they're going to be pretty tough to stop, especially when Mitchell kind of gets rolling. But, it's not going to be like an instant, oh, the Cavs make a lot of sense right away thing either, right? Like, Darius Garland's an incredible on-ball player. He should probably have the ball in his hands a whole lot. How him and Donovan Mitchell coexist is going to be something that's going to probably take some time. Whereas the Raptors, they're going to walk into the season. I've used this stat before, but John Schumann's continuity ranking says the Raptors is the #1 team in terms of returning minutes from last year to this year. That matters. Like, that is going to have an impact at the start of the season in particular. And if you bank some wins early on, that is going to help you sort of with the overall win total down the line. So, yeah, I think it's awesome that the East is this stacked. At the same time, I'm yearning for the days of the Raptors being the easy 3 seed with 47 wins. That's not going to be the case this year for sure. I could see there being like 7 50-win teams in the Eastern Conference at this point. Like that's how loaded it seems to be. Someone's going to fall out. Maybe it's Miami as they kind of age and maybe sort of gear themselves less towards the regular season and more towards postseason sustainability. I don't know, but it certainly makes the top 6 battle utterly fascinating because there are 7 teams there now that I think can lay claim to being one of the 6 best teams in the Eastern Conference. So it's not going to be some sort of cakewalk to a 5 seed. Like I kind of thought it might be before the news of the Nets and Cavs being real serious contenders again. It's certainly going to kind of muddle things up. What do you think this does to the sort of burgeoning rivalry between the Raptors and Cavs? Like, does this make you more excited about what the next few years could hold in store? I know we've kind of kicked around the idea of the sort of Lake Erie triangle of the Raptors, Pistons, and Cavs eventually sort of taking over the Eastern Conference and ruling it and making beat reporters very sad that they have to travel to these cities in the middle of the summer, which is silly because they're all very nice in the summertime or July, or whenever the hell the finals are played. June? That when they play? Who knows? Yeah. The schedule has been weird for a couple of years. But either way, how do you think this kind of adds some fuel to the burgeoning rivalry between these two teams?
It definitely adds to it. I think people will be a lot more hyped for opening night. I think
hell yeah.
That you look at transitioning from the LeBronto era to this Scotty Barnes versus Evan Mobley era.
Yeah.
And all the pieces involved. One of the questions you maybe weigh up is who has the better core for the next 5 years, the next decade. And so the Cavs now being able to add Donovan Mitchell to that mix makes it more interesting to debate, right? I think if you were to just list a top 3, it would be very interesting, but the Raptors probably just have a deeper core. So when you start talking about who the top 5 is, the top 6 is, that's when it swings the Raptors' way. But I think it's a fun matchup. I think the Cavs are good for the league in the sense that, they've got that Twin Towers with Jared Allen and Evan Mobley, and they're doing something different.
Yep.
Now you'll say, oh, okay, they've got a small backcourt and they're going to play a bit more like other teams. But no, I think it's still going to be interesting. It's still going to be fun. And obviously, as an aside, the Timberwolves are going to be fascinating to watch too with Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns. And so I think those teams are good for the league in terms of doing stuff different. The Raptors obviously do things pretty differently as well, especially on the defensive end of the floor. But I think the matchup is going to be fun to watch. And then, the big picture rivalry is one that should be more intense now with Mitchell in the mix.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be a blast. And again, I keep going back to the styles make fights thing, and like the twin towers against everyone is like a medium tower. It's going to be awesome. It's good to have competitive basketball, I think is the thing, and I hope that this sort of phase that the league seems to be in, where there's not a crazy sort of condensed two or three teams that are obviously better than everybody else. Like I would hope that the fun of being a 50-ish win team is kind of being realized by a lot of folks right now. It's nice to see the Wolves kind of going for it, the Cavs themselves too. Like, there's a lot of value in kind of playing fun, cool regular season games and, having that, competition throughout the year. Like, that's great. That's kind of what we do this for, man. The playoffs are fun and all, but like we spend 6 months of the year watching regular season basketball. It's nice that we have a little bit more in terms of drama and tension baked into that with this Mitchell trade and sort of what it does to the East hierarchy. Speaking of the East hierarchy, we're going to round out on the other side. We've kind of talked to death the top part of the Eastern Conference. We're going to try to pinpoint any teams, perhaps, below this top 7 grouping that we've now kind of established here, and see, like, should any of these teams be worrying the Raptors? Should any of these teams be sort of having designs on top 4 seeding in the Eastern Conference as well? Are we forgetting the Bulls or the Hawks or whomever? We'll get to that in just 1 second here, but first, just a reminder to check out Locked On NBA every single day on your favorite podcast apps for free. It's also on YouTube as a rotating cast of Locked On NBA hosts. Jump in there to fill you in on all the latest news. Plenty of Donovan Mitchell talk on today's show, so be sure to go check that out right when you're done here listening to Locked On Raptors. Again, it's on your favorite podcast apps and on YouTube for free. All right, Big V, the Eastern Conference hierarchy. We've established, it seems, Boston, Milwaukee, Miami, Philly, Brooklyn, Toronto, Cleveland feel like the top 7 in the East now. Of course, there are 6 playoff spots proper. There's 10 seeds overall in the play-in mix. So that leaves a few other spots for teams to kind of be in that conversation. To me, I think I only see 2 teams that I'm even sort of considering like actual meaningfully good teams in the Eastern Conference, and I feel like the Wembanyama of it all is going to force a lot of these teams in a downward direction once they kind of realize how overmatched they are in the East. But, it's probably the Bulls and the Hawks. We'll get to those teams for sure. Are there any other teams kind of in that mix beneath? Of course, the Knicks without Donovan Mitchell will be one of those teams. You've got the Pacers who seem to be fully embracing the tank. The Pistons might be on the come up if Cade Cunningham is as good as he kind of projected in the back half of last year. The Wizards are always trying and failing to be average. Where are you with the sort of bottom tier of the Eastern Conference? Is there any team in there? We'll get to the Bulls and the Hawks in a sec because I think they're kind of in their own little level. But any team in the bottom depths of the East that you're looking at as like a potential climber in the East standings this year that could give the Raptors some problems as it relates to the race for the play-in seeds?
Not really. I think you've listed it right. Like the Pacers, Magic, Wizards, I think will be pretty bad. I think that some people are high on the Pistons, and I agree they do have good potential, but I just think they're going to be one of those teams that plays to that potential in the first half of the season, and then is like, okay, we saw what we needed to. We need to prioritize the ping pong balls now and just go into tank mode.
Oh, the Prestige Special is what you're calling that. Okay, great. Love it. Love when more teams do that, for sure.
Yeah. And then I'd put the Hornets pretty low as well. They didn't really do anything this offseason besides re-signing Cody Martin. So
they're going to stink, man. I think they're going to be really bad.
Yeah. So you've got those bad teams. And then it's an interesting mix. Like I would put the Bucks and the Celtics as the clear-cut top 2 in the East. Mm-hmm. And then I would not be surprised if like Miami, Philly, Toronto, I've got in a similar tier in terms of juking it out for that home court. And then I would say the Cavs, Hawks, Bulls are in that next tier.
Where do you have the Nets?
The Nets are in just a stratosphere by themselves.
I hate this team. I hate them so much. They're stupid.
There's the theoretical Nets. There's the practical Nets. There's the New Jersey Nets. I don't know, man. Like it's very difficult to think of what they might be, what they could be. At their best, they could be a top 3 team in the East. They could be in that Bucks Celtics mix. At their worst, they could be going for a play-in spot again. And so they'll be somewhere. They'll be somewhere in there, depending on who shows up, when, how, all of that. So the Nets just, TBD. There's just too much going on there for me to really be analytical about them and be like, this is what they could be. Like,
it is.
We can talk about Simmons and Kyrie and KD all we want. They might end up playing 10 games together.
Yeah. You ever watch the show Selling Sunset, Vivek?
No.
Okay, so this is a great program. I love it. It's my favorite show. That and Selling the OC, the spin-off series. It's about like high listing real estate agents in LA. They sell fancy houses and stuff. But it's like a reality show. It's like created by the guy who made The Hills. And so this show, I love it because there's like an air of normalcy to it. Like some people are just like there to work and sell houses. And then there's a couple people who kind of parachute in who are like detached from reality and add all the drama to the show. There's a character named Christine on Selling Sunset who kind of starts out the series as like a very serious like real estate agent, and then as the series goes along realizes, oh, I can just be the psycho on the show and become famous for that. And she kind of does that and becomes not really a real person who you can evaluate within the context of the other people in the office. Christine Quinn is the Nets. Like, it's full on, like, I don't know how to, like, evaluate, because you're not real. You don't have any sort of tangible relatability or anything like that. So that's kind of where I'm at with the Nets, too. It's, like, impossible to evaluate. That said, Kevin Durant's
Zach
very
Lowe
good.
was saying the same thing, too. He was like, everything you say about the Nets is, on paper, they could be this. On paper, they would do this.
Yeah.
The last couple of years, we have not seen that on paper version very much. So, yeah.
It's going to be wild when the Royce O'Neal deal turns out to be an absolute game changer and what makes that team real and legitimate. The deal that we all laughed at 5 minutes before the demand. Either way, let's go quickly to the Bulls and the Hawks because I think they're interesting. I am lower on these teams than I think most people are. The Bulls, I'm just concerned as hell about Lonzo Ball. Like, it doesn't even sound like he's guaranteed to be healthy for the start of the season, which is a problem considering he was kind of the straw that stirred that whole drink last year. He was kind of the bridge between the sort of slow it down half court DeMar offense and the run and gun fly all up and down the floor Lonzo Zach LaVine offense, and like not having him is a problem. He's their best wing defender along with Alex Caruso, also very important on a team that doesn't really have a lot of defense in other very important spots. It's dubious, I think. And they didn't do a whole lot in the offseason except for bring in Andre Drummond, who is vibes poison. So I'm concerned about the Bulls. The Hawks, I admit, I kind of have biases against the Hawks because I just can't stand watching Trae Young play basketball. Drives me insane. And, that's just sort of one of those I'm never going to get it situations. But do you have like a read on those teams? Do you view them on the same sort of level as the Raptors, the Cavs, that kind of tier teams? Or are you kind of with me in that they kind of occupy their own tier of probably play-in locks, but I'm not actually all that worried about either of those squads?
Yeah, they're play-in locks. I just don't see them as potentially being more significant than that. I think maybe if they really are confident in what Onyeka Okongwu is bringing to the table this season, and then there's a deal to be worked with Clint Capella and upgrade the roster that way in a meaningful way. Again, at the wing position, I think that could make things a bit more interesting for them. But beyond that, it's tough to see. I'm a big fan of Okongwu. I think he could be their starting center. But the Capella situation, how that plays out, is going to be interesting to watch this year.
Also, John Collins is still on that team. Like, they seem to hate him, but he's still there. I don't know. It's a weird team.
So, I would put the Cavs, Hawks, Bulls below the Raptors. I think the Bulls last season, especially that first half of the season, were another one of those really fascinating teams because of the fact that they were relying on two guards as their defensive linchpins in Caruso and Ball, and I thought that was like a different way of doing things and was really interesting. And then obviously the DeMar stuff that was happening was cool. Zach LaVine, I'm curious where the knee is at now. Obviously he got his money, but we'll see where that's at. Vucevic, it hasn't been the greatest fit. He's had some really good moments, but he's had some bad moments as well. So what's next season going to look like? So I have some question marks about them, but obviously DeMar has proven to be a regular season king and he gets his wins. So maybe that respect is due. So yeah, I think the Raptors are better than all those teams. The Cavs have addressed that gap in a meaningful way, but yeah, I'm not worried.
Yeah, it's sort of like a situation where, like, yeah, lots of other good things are going on for other teams around the Raptors, but also, like, plenty of good is going on with the Raptors as well. And the reasons to be bullish on the Raptors as a team are still all very valid. It's just, it might be a little more difficult because there's some teams that are trying, which is a good thing overall for the health of the league and the entertainment product. So, also on the Bulls, Patrick Williams is 25 days younger than Scotty Barnes. Maybe he figures it out. You got hurt last year. You played like 10 games. Maybe he is something to kind of change the ceiling of that team. And maybe that is all they need is like, oh, a 4 who can defend everybody and finish a bunch of buckets. That's not the worst thing in the world. So yeah,
we should probably note the Bulls played the Raptors really well last year.
They did. They definitely did. They were the one team to beat them in that stretch where they beat all the important teams when they played them. It was the Hawks, Hornets, Heat, and Bulls. They went 7-1. Bulls picked the only win. They're annoying for sure. DeMar gets up to beat the Raptors, as it turns out. We'll leave it there. Thank you so much to those of you who tuned in today. Really appreciate it. And we'll be back again next week. No show on Monday because of the holiday, but we'll be back resuming things on Tuesday. This is going to be the last appearance for Big V for a while because you're going on vacation, which is why we doubled up this week. Anything you would like to promote before we get out of here, Big V?
No, just the usual stuff, but I just want to quickly note, Pakistan is going through a horrible time with these devastating floods. And so if you are able to help, please do. There are several resources available through Canadian charities. IDRF is one that I use pretty consistently. So, maybe we can drop some links in this episode.
Absolutely.
But it's a horrible situation for Pakistan right now. So if there is anyone that's listening and can help, please do so.
Yeah, absolutely. A horrible situation that the Canadian government has offered pocket change to help support. So, that's there will be some links in the description of the show for you to go and donate to the Pakistan Relief Fund. And thank you, Big V, for bringing that to the attention of the show. We'll round it there. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll talk to you again on Tuesday. In the meantime, go listen to Locked On Blue Jays and make it your second listen of the day. It's great. They're filling you in on the Blue Jays as they push towards the postseason. Into September now, baby. We love September baseball where things are competitive. It's all we've ever wanted. Am I right? So go listen to Locked On Blue Jays as they break it all down for you each and every day. And have yourself a wonderful long weekend. We'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.